How's it going, guys? I'm Josh. We are in the most delightful place ever, Central Park, and I have partnered with Canon to give you tons of tips on taking compelling nature photos. Now, I'm doing so with their EOS M50, a very powerful little mirrorless camera, and this is another episode of Photographing NYC. Let's get it going. Start the day in the North Woods shooting some waterfalls. Now the reason why is because the sky matters in landscape photography. The same shot at sunset versus midday looks completely different. So while the sun is high and kind of average looking, we're going to shoot stuff low to the ground like this waterfall, and then as it gets later in the day, we'll get those loftier views and incorporate the sky. One of my favorite tips for beautiful waterfall photos is this neutral density filter. So this darkens your shot significantly, allowing you to use much slower shutter speeds. And with that comes smoothing out the water to give it this really awesome surreal quality, capturing this motion you never see with your eyes. So for example, this is the shot without it at 1/60th of a second. And once I pop this guy on, I can go as slow as 5 seconds, and you'll see it smooths out all the water, giving it a really gorgeous look. If you want to learn more about ND filters, I have a whole video on them, link over here. When you're doing long exposures and you find that perfect shot, take a couple of the exact same photos to avoid for any unaccounted movement. So for example, we have these flowers here, we've got all this greenery, and if there's a gust of wind, it'll be blurry in our photo. But when everything's still, we'll nail that perfect shot. We're now in the Conservatory Gardens, and we're gonna do some focus stacking. Now, focus stacking is an awesome technique for when you wanna have everything in the shot in focus, from things that are very close up to things that are very far back. Now normally you'd think, all right, let's just use a very high aperture number. Sometimes there's just not enough light for that, and or you don't want to have diffraction, which is the loss of sharpness from using too high of an aperture number. One great feature on the Canon EOS M50 is that it has focus peaking, which allows you to see what part of the photo is in focus precisely with a bunch of dots covering it. So I'm going to focus on the closest up subject in the frame. I'm going to take my first photo. Now what we're going to do is we're going to progressively focus further and further back on each subject that we want to have in focus until we've reached the furthest back subject. So this might be 10 shots, it might be 15. Be liberal with this because the more shots, the more flexibility you have. And then we're just gonna stitch them all together in Photoshop and we have a beautifully sharp image. You wanna be very careful with focus stacking for moving subjects. Like when the wind comes and hits these flowers, they move just a little bit, which can offset the shot and make it much harder for Photoshop to align them. Try and stick with stationary subjects. I realized in the pond you have some nice reflections of the people sitting around it. So I took some video and then tossed in some cherry blossoms and got some nice ripple effects over people's faces. We're now along the mall and there's always tons of action happening here. You got rollerbladers, skateboarders, BMXers. So we're gonna do some panning shots, also known as motion blur. We're gonna bring our shutter speed way down. For skateboarders and bikers, I like around 1/10 of a second. It's nice and slow, gives you a good artistic blur. You can go faster if you want less blur, slower if you want more. So we're gonna get down on one knee. We're gonna stabilize like this, just to keep it really steady. And you're gonna follow along with the movement of your wheeled subject and just snap along. So what happens is you're following their movement so the background gets blurred while they stay nice and sharp. Super creative shots, looks awesome. Take a bunch of shots because your subject's always gonna be different, your pan will always be different, and this is just how you give yourself the most options. 9 out of 10 of your motion blur shots are gonna be trash, but that one where you nail everything, the perfect movement, the perfect trick, you're gonna have a beautiful photo. If you wanna hit all these spots we're shooting at today, I've made a map full of them, link in the description down below. Side note, this stage is really fun to skate off of. Here's an old clip. Our next spot, we're gonna head over to Bethesda Fountain. This is like a major hot spot of the park. So tons of action here, which is perfect for street photography. Now, when you're shooting anything fast-paced, whether it be the rollerbladers or the bubbles, I recommend using high-speed continuous shooting because that helps you capture the action and never miss a moment. Now, the EOS M50 can do 10 photos per second, which is super awesome and guarantees I don't miss the shot. I was also having a lot of fun doing some 60 frames per second video with this guy. I think I got some good bubble popping with that. Major tip, when you're shooting in nature, your lens is gonna get dirty. There's weather. So I always carry around a brush or some sort of cleaning element so I can keep my lenses clean. Another thing, when I walk around, I always have my finger on the shutter button ready to shoot, because you never know when an opportunity will present itself. We're here on Oak Bridge, and this is one of the best spots in the park for wildlife photography. Great for bird watching. You've always got geese just floating around here. So we're gonna post up for a couple minutes. Patience is the real key for this sort of thing, because you never know when a great animal is gonna come out and say what's up. I've got a very fast shutter speed. I'm gonna shoot at 1/500th of a second. For birds, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go as fast as 1/800th. And of course, high-speed continuous mode is really the move here. 10 photos per second will help me capture that perfect flight movement or whatever animal doing the animal things it's supposed to be doing. There's no photographer more patient than the wildlife photographers. They'll sometimes wait hours just to see one animal. It might not even come out one day. Hopefully, we don't wait hours. Might have to settle for a squirrel. We're inventing a new term now. If the only thing you photograph when you're doing wildlife is squirrels and ducks, it's called tame life. Next off, we're gonna do some time lapses. Now in nature photography, people often put so much focus on the macro, the big sweeping views, the landscapes, but what people forget about is the micro, the beautiful detail in nature. In this time lapse, we're gonna capture the progression of the moss in the water, as well as the reflection of the trees, which I think looks really cool. This camera can shoot a 4K time lapse, which is pretty neat. Let's get one going. And now we get to enjoy the best part of time lapses, which is just posting up, letting it ride out, and enjoying the nature. What's awesome about time lapses is they capture a sense of progression that photos rarely can. Any sort of movement that's more long-term, time lapses are a really great option. We're now going to take our sunset photo and we're posted up at the ravine. I really love this place for a couple reasons. So first, it is a beautiful, beautiful scene. Now, no matter how good the sky is, if you just take a photo of the sky with nothing else in the photo, it's going to be a boring shot. So it's nice to have a foreground element like these buildings. Whenever you shoot a sunset, I recommend posting up about 20 or 30 minutes before, because one, the light is oftentimes best shining on these buildings during golden hour, right before sunset, and two, it gives you time to set up your composition and start shooting before the sun even begins to set, so you're ready to go. Now that we're set up, I'm just going to be continuously shooting photos every couple minutes just as the sky continues to change, because we never know what the peak point of the sunset is. I like to keep my camera in the same position throughout the sunset because it gives me options to make a composite. So for example, we had the best light on the buildings during golden hour when it was shining on it nice and red, yet the best part of the sky was during the sunset. So I can actually combine these two images to make a really nice composite. With the two symmetrical buildings reflected on the water, it gives you nice horizontal and vertical symmetry. Should be a nice composition for this photo. Final tip, nighttime photography in Central Park is popping off. You've got these beautifully iconic lights throughout the entire park, and this place is pretty romantic. So many couples holding hands. So go find yourself a loved one and hold hands with them, or photograph other people holding hands. Silhouette them with the light. Two phenomenal options. Huge thank you to Canon for sponsoring this video. This EOS M50 has been such a pleasure to work with, and I think it's performed quite well today. Anyway, do me a solid and vote which neighborhood we should shoot next in this series right over here. And that is all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you eventually.